On the agenda is the consultant presentation of the three distinct design options.
Can I make a comment?
Sorry, yes.
First of all, there were some private citizens here yesterday at the meeting, and I feel uncomfortable that they weren't given an opportunity to look and maybe comment. I don't know what the policy of the city is, but if people make an effort to show up, I think they ought to be able to have a little input in this process. I don't know what, what the format is for that. The thing is on these issues we're bringing up, is this going to affect the whole city, and it's going to affect the residents in this area? And if they come, like I say, if they come, we should at least open it up. I know on the Commission of Aging, if we have visitors, we open it up if they have any comments whatsoever. But I don't know what the policy of the city is on that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to do that. I think just how yesterday's meeting kind of went with us getting down there and looking at I kind of lost track of that. So I apologize. And I think that makes sense going forward. Does that make sense from the city's standpoint?
I'm sorry.
Hold up.
I was just trying to respond really quickly to that. So generally, if we are going to allow comments from the public, it would be best practice that we would notice it on the agenda that way, because otherwise members of the public who might be interested in commenting, if they look at the agenda and don't see it specifically listed, they may not attend the meeting thinking that they don't have an opportunity to comment. So if we are going to accept public comments, I would recommend that we include it on the agenda and also limit it to like 3 minutes, like we do for common council meetings or whatever the time limit is that's decided by this body. Because otherwise if we have 20 people and they each want to speak for 5 minutes, that could end up taking up a lot of time. There is a community outreach component, but what we have found for other projects is that if we keep it completely open at the very beginning of the process, like we did in 2019, we will get all kinds of feedback for all kinds of wishes and desires in the community. And I think that what we had discussed at a staff level is that once we have some concrete options, then we would take them out to the community and request feedback at that point. But we definitely will want to get public input as part of this project.
Yeah, it's just a thing if people show up and they have something to say, I'd like to hear it.
And
if nervous about, just a group of people making these significant decisions for the city of Middleton. I mean, no, it's going to go to the council, but still, we're setting up the format.
And if the committee wishes on the next agenda, we could include public comment on that agenda.
Do we need to vote on that?
I don't know if we need to
Just
vote.
consensus.
Yeah, I mean, does everybody think 3 minutes per person seems reasonable? Is there any objections to that request?
I would think there will be numerous opportunities for them to comment in the future as it hits each of the committees in the city. But I don't have any objection to public comments.
Right. I guess if it's 1 or 2 people, like I definitely would like the issue I think that Abby brought up is if it's 20 people, now that's most of our meeting.
That's something we can't predict.
Right.
But it seems like even on the first meeting, if there's specific concerns, people will show up. If there's not concerns, they probably, like Abby said, they probably won't show up.
Right.
It's whatever the committee wants.
Maybe for the next meeting, Abby, if you could add that, and then we can maybe use that as a trial run to see how it goes. Does that sound reasonable to everyone? All right. Why don't we go with that? Hearing no objections. All right. Anybody else?
This is Mayor Kuhn. I just wanted to pop on and say hi. I really appreciate everything you guys are doing. And there is a committee that does do that public comment infrequently. But they do say something like 3 minutes per person up to the first half hour of the meeting. So if your concern is that it may usurp the whole time, like say if you get 40 people that show up and each want to speak for 3 minutes, just know that staff do have some other things that they can suggest or put out there so that if you only have 2 or 3 public comments and it's 3 minutes each, then you can roll on to your agenda. That's no worries. But if you think you're going to get the 30 or 40, there is that ability to also say a time limit of say 30 for the first 30 minutes of public comment, 3 minutes per person. So just a frameworking suggestion to consider.
Yeah, thanks for the tip. I think that's a good way to phrase it. Anything else before we jump into the agenda? Many of the committee members? All right, with that consultant presentation for the distinct design options.
Thanks, Justin. So yeah, I think we had a really fun night last night, playing with blocks and getting some ideas down for what the city is looking for as far as a civic campus goes. And I wanted to start with saying that because I think, and our team talked about it quite a bit too, in that this is a civic campus. This is what we're tasked to do. This is what this, ever since this started, the look at it is, a whole campus, not just one building, not 3 buildings, but how it all integrates, how urban design can work with these buildings, how we can do the inside and the outside together holistically, so everything seems and acts appropriately with each other. So some things we heard last night, that increased density is okay. We heard increased accessibility is definitely desirable. Improving or increasing parking is most likely going to be needed as part of this. Green space is important. It's not the overarching goal of this, but having that green space and public outdoor space, whether it's on the roof, on the street, is very important. So we want to make sure that we have thoughtful design for those spaces as well. Respecting the neighbors is a big part of this as well. We're surrounded, by residential and other uses that we have to be mindful of. So that came into our discussion as well. This is these space needs that we're looking at. Our team had existing square feet of these buildings. We have space needs meetings with all of the directors and people responsible for hiring. We kind of have this 10-year plan of, employees that are here now, what's needed. Obviously, there's not enough space for the employees that are being hired at the time. So that all goes into it. Staff projections. So we just want to understand that everyone understands that this is, looking out 10 or so years for employee growth and city growth. So we want to make sure that our designs are reflective of that. Cost is important, obviously. Definitely a consideration as we move forward. But I think all in all, we just had great conversations last night. Looking at the pictures from last night and seeing exactly what people's thoughts were and where they moved the blocks and where they could see these civic uses happening were awesome to see again. I think you guys will like some of the stuff we came up with today. So I don't want to take too much time here in the intro, so I'd like to move on with Molly kind of explaining some of the options that we came to.
Are you ready to share your screen?
So
I'm gonna bring images first.
yeah.
You have,
Oh,
there we go.
all right.
All right. So just a quick summary of, some of the options that we present or that were discussed. This is one option of what we're calling the hybrid option, where the existing library building gets converted to senior center facilities. And then on the north side of Hubbard, build out of city hall facilities and then library facilities. And then parking along Elmwood, and then utilizing the existing library parking. Excuse me. And then we took a few of the concepts and just overlaid them and summarized them. So we're showing one thing we heard is that it sounded like the Plaza Street was the preferred streetscape option to start with. So we're showing Plaza Street with parallel parking in this concept, with a 4-story library, replacing the existing library. The opportunity for a civic campus green space between the library and new senior parking, and with a senior center facility next to the Hubbard Street Diner. Across the street from that parking and civic campus green space would be the city hall. So there's a nice kind of dialogue of the 3 buildings back and forth, creating some open space across from each building, and also engaging in that streetscape. So that was what we're calling new construction alternate 1. And let's see, yeah, I know. There we go. New construction alternate 2 is again using replacing the existing library with a new facility, and placing city hall structure next to that library, potentially connecting those buildings on second and third stories, and creating a pedestrian throughway kind of alley.
Kind of where it currently is with crossing the tracks there.
Yep.
Into their lot.
Yep. And then creating a plaza off of that alley space, again with the plaza streetscape, and then we're showing angled parking as an option on the south side of the street, with green space on the north side. The senior center in our discussion was kind of, I would say, pushed up against the existing, essentially replacing the footprint of the existing senior center. What we're proposing is rotating that to really emphasize the streetscape feel along Hubbard. And, that would open up opportunities for a plaza along Hubbard, and then create kind of this civic campus parking facility that would wrap the building. But really, with turning the senior center building, that would engage Hubbard in a way that I think emphasizes the streetscape feel, the campus. So.
Questions now? You want to go to post?
Sure, we. Questions now.
Yeah.
So in this one, the pedestrian thoroughfare.
Yeah.
Just need to make sure that whatever happens, we can maintain that right away, and just lessons learned from the T-Well project.
Sure.
And that needs to be kind of highly coordinated. So when you say 2-story senior center, is this 2 stories above ground, or is this also including a basement?
This is all above ground.
This is all above ground, okay. And in this option, there's no underground parking, is that correct?
Right. Yeah, this is all new construction on this.
Okay, but no underground parking under any of these, we're thinking, okay.
It's, up for.
It could
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
it could, okay.
There's opportunity for that.
Sure. I think a couple just other comments, and so far in both of these, it seems like we've removed the at grade parking completely from the library or it's like across the street. And I think it's important to still maintain some of that. There also be, I know we're just talking blocks here. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but loading, unloading, if there's any way to combine some of those functions, be nice as well. Couple of the comments with I'll call it the Z parking. Functionally, as far as getting the streetscape that we want, building versus parking, flipping it makes sense. I'm just kind of wondering, once you start laying that out, how functional it becomes, tying that parking together with the Z. Any other comments on this one from, yeah.
Yeah, on the civic campus parking, I guess my only concern there is to try to keep the integrity of the Raleigh House and green space around it a bit. I mean, that's one of the landmarks in the city of Middleton and, try to avoid encroachment on that. But the visual lighting and street lighting is, or open spaces like that. But I know the discussions we had yesterday, this is kind of changed what we had at one time. We had the library and the city hall against the Raleigh House. But I think we need, like I said, that's a landmark in the city of Middleton. We need to protect that through this process of how we site these buildings.
Mhm. And just adding to that, if there is a building, it would be nice that's next to it. It would be nice to celebrate the Raleigh House with the building, give views to it, not just like put up a blank wall against it. And like right now, it's adjacent to the dumpsters, right? Like it would be nice to celebrate that a little more, kind of moving forward. That's a great comment. Could you maybe jump back to the first option, and maybe we can take a look at that one as well? So this one obviously states structured parking. I think there's certainly merits to this. And all options are is the library kind of 4 stories, the city hall 3, and the senior center 2. Is that fairly consistent, or is it kind of jump up and down?
In the block planning, yes.
Yeah.
This is so high level.
Yeah.
Play with how it
Right,
interacts.
right. Agreed. I think just going over the previous comments, I think the more that if we are upping the density, I think it makes sense on the northern part, or southern parcel, next to the railroad tracks, away from the pedestrians. In this case, like the structured parking seems to, in my mind, split up the campus from the rest of downtown. But it is essentially located to serve all of downtown, right? But I don't know that we want structured parking kind of as our focal point, right? Right. Even if there's a way to tie into the first floor with some of the city hall functions to bleed into there to give some type of, I'll call it a storefront, right? Something to look at other than parked cars on the street front, and tie the east and west end of downtown together a little better. Oh, yeah,
On
sorry.
the
anytime.
structured parking, that's multi-level.
I'm assuming, and I don't know, like, as far as introducing any structured parking, if that's something we'd be looking at, Abby, or sorry, I caught you off guard. The structured parking, like if we're showing those on plans, is that something that would be like future, or is that something that would be part of this?
I think we would want to look at parking needs based on, where we decide the building should be located and the size, and then determine if additional parking is needed. I know there have been several times over the course of the last couple decades where our council has considered building structured parking in downtown. And they've never taken that additional step due to concerns about the cost to construct it, but also the long-term maintenance cost. One factor I think that would have to be considered would be beginning to charge a fee for parking in downtown Middleton. And so far, there hasn't really been the political desire or will to want to start charging for on-street parking. But what we've learned through some of the parking studies that we've done is if you're going to build a structure and you want people to park in it, you have to begin to charge for on-street parking, because otherwise people will look for on-street parking as the most desirable, quick, easy option. And you don't want to build a parking structure and then not have people wanting to park in it. So you have to give them an incentive, like, you know, if you charge a fee, maybe make the structure parking slightly lower cost than the short-term on-street parking. So, I mean, it's definitely something that the committee could consider recommending to the council. There are a lot of concerns and factors involved with structured parking just because of the initial cost to construct, the long-term maintenance cost, and also the inability to convert structured parking to any other type of land use if the demand for that type of parking decreases over time.
Thanks for that explanation. Yeah, absolutely.
The
Anytime.
situation for the senior center at that point, there's some senior center parking there, but we have to keep in mind that we have to have access for Meals on Wheels. That takes up quite a bit of space. I don't know how many spots they use, but that's kind of a busy spot. So they can get in and out safely, get meals to the senior residents.
Mhm. I guess my just initial thought after you kind of gave that explanation, Abby, is in my preference, and everybody might have a different preference in mind, but would be to provide underground parking where we can and as well as street parking where we can, and steer away from the sole structured parking that doesn't have any other uses incorporated in it. I think the first floor or the first level, the ground level, is kind of our primest real estate, and we prefer to put parking underground, obviously, where we can. I think we definitely need I think we need to maintain all the on-street parking we have, and I think we need to include some, even if it's designated, on-street parking lots for each of the three functions, as well as any loading that
You
we
say
need.
on-street parking lots, what is that?
Sorry,
At-
at grade,
Okay.
at grade parking. Thanks for asking the question.
No, that's fine, because yeah, that option 2 that we showed had the angled parking, which would be a little different, having no parking on one side of the street and having angled on the other. And when we did the calculations, it does add a few spots actually to what you could do now. And that's provided everyone is parking bumper to bumper horizontally like now.
Right. I mean, angled parking's always kind of fascinated me. It seems a little not as safe as just parallel. Am I wrong in saying that? Like, it seems like you don't get the same views coming out of a parking lot or out of an angled parking spot as you do parallel. So that would just be maybe a safety concern about adding parallel spots, but
Yeah.
that's once again just my. So as far as, how many different alternates of the new building are we going through?
We just have the 2 here.
The two that we just discussed,
Yep.
okay. Is there any pluses or minuses that, like, which one stands out, I guess, to the group?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't want to throw any more stuff out there, but like there was options from last night that had City Hall kind of spread out a little more along Hubbard there and not right on the block. So that's something we can, toy with too, if that's desirable.
Over that way.
Yeah, I guess my other comment is I think the more building we can have on the street and force the parking either towards the railroad track or towards the middle of the site, in my mind, gives it a little better feel to the downtown.
I agree. And I think structured parking is in general pretty ugly.
Right.
I would not like that at all if possible.
To see this come down.
Right. I think preferred would be underground versus, multi-story parking, but I think we still need to incorporate some on-street parking for seniors, for short-term drop-off locations, et cetera.
Could you go back to alternate 2, please? The senior center would leave on the first one.
Sorry, there's some discussion. So
Sorry.
there was also a hybrid option that was first presented that had the senior center, the
Is-
senior center going to the current library.
Is that something that's
This
coming?
is,
Here's the hybrid option right here.
Sorry, you missed
And
this
that
part.
shows
I'm
us,
sorry.
no, it's okay.
yeah, the library just taking the place of the senior center.
Mhm.
Or senior center taking the place of the library, and then new construction for library and.
In you, it says. we should put-
The thing about this is you have parking really for
Yeah.
each facility.
And so
a
this
way.
is one of the options they're offering.
So this is a hybrid option. So there's 3 different options. I
Yeah.
think that the
Mhm.
first option is that we kind of went through the exercise earlier in this committee is that we the consultants did a good job of going through what the existing building is, and they're still coming up with numbers, but what would it mean to just rehab what we have right now, right? And then the
Right.
second option is this hybrid option that Nate presented first, and then
Right.
now we're on to like the third option, and we
Build
kind of have
and-
sub options right now that we're
Right.
trying to narrow down, right? That's a good way to.
This might
Sorry.
clarify that a little bit, so that we did take the 2 options that we talked, like like renovating and adding on to the existing building. So we diagrammed that here, and they're just plan diagrams at this point. And I know that Nate, kind of shared a disclaimer, we drew these very quickly, and all this has to be vetted. But what you're looking at right here are the lower levels of the buildings. We talked about adding on a lower level to match up, and then, something above grade. So you see the addition for the senior center in the purple, and then the city hall is in the blue. So, as you mentioned, Ken, there's a dotted line on there. If you do see these in the future, we would hold that structure back at least 10 feet away from the wall and then tie in. And then city hall, you see we're just adding on to the west, kind of taking up that area. There's that recessed plaza outside. It would really kind of take up that space, and it would be 2 levels, and we could pull the grade away and get some daylight to the lower level. And then when you get up to the first floor, okay, at grade where you enter the buildings. So again, starting at the senior center, oops, I have an errant block over here. Ignore that, kind of floating over here. You see there's an addition to the east side of the senior center. Again, that's at 2 stories, so that gets you the needed square footage for that space. We would need to reconfigure the surface parking. So there's roughly about 43 parking spaces there. And you see we pull that main entry around from Hubbard Avenue to the parking lot side, because some of the things we've noticed is that there's a problem with drop off and pickup, and the buses double parking on Hubbard, which is really unsafe. And then certainly as you move forward further, maybe that row parking up by the building is for drop off and pickup. And then you see a hatched area that is just a placeholder for delivery and meal, pickup for Meals on Wheels. And again, nothing is really worked out. These are just really big ideas. And then you see the addition to the city hall. Then as you move across the street to the library side, again, this is the option where we're maintaining the library and then adding on to it. So you see there's that addition in the parking lot and
Sorry, we're still seeing. Oh, sorry, here we go. Yeah,
Sorry.
thank you.
so we've kind of worked through this stepwise. So this, we understand, it's less advantageous because we're taking up that parking, but we just want to take you through the thought process. So as you move up, then you see the other second and third floor of the library, and then the fourth floor. So it's basically a 4-floor addition. So then on the top floor, the thought is with all those colors, there would be a space for outdoor patio, education programs. There could be green roof, an area for photovoltaics, and just kind of a placeholder, just to give you an idea of our thoughts there. So we had another renovation option that we talked about this morning. It was that kind of, crazier thought, it really pertained to City Hall. What if you took this spot, like underneath, this whole half of the building that we're sitting in now, well, actually just to that side of the council chambers and just removing it, right? And just building a new 2-story addition. Just a thought. Because then what that does is allows you to work within the existing footprint of this City Hall, right? And then you can maintain that little outdoor public space and maintain as much of the green as you can. And what that does, and again, now this probably is not valid given what you talked about, what Abby mentioned about structured parking. What if in that scenario, you did a 2-story addition to the senior center above grade, and then right next to it, we have to reconfigure the parking, but you could drive in at surface level, just right off the street from Elmwood or Hubbard Avenue. But you'll see on this side, on this east property line, we have a little ramp that goes up to a second level of parking. And then that gets you about 63 parking spaces. So that was just another strategy to think about with that parking on that north side of Hubbard. But more importantly, if you look at the south side by the library, and again, this is an addition, and this is something we talked about a little bit about how can we maintain some parking on that side. So that yellow or orange, if you will, along Hubbard is the library space, and then directly behind that is parking. Now, the dimensions of the site, and again, none of this is really fully, baked, but we'd have to have a little steeper ramp coming in right here. And then when you get to about this line right here, then it's flat parking. And then you would drive underneath this part of the building and park in here. And that gets you about 70 parking spaces. Just beginning to think about how to park underneath that library site. Okay. The other idea we had, and you'll see on the east side of the library, we thought, well, okay, if you're excavating down, and we can certainly put the loading dock for the library on this side of the building and make it look as good as we can, but then the city might say, well, I'm not too happy about loading and a dock door over here. What if there was an easement agreement with St. Luke's on that drive, and you could put the loading on the east side for the library? Again, it's just a super high level. Oh, yeah.
So how many stories is that addition then for the library?
4.
That's 4?
Mhm.
So at what's shown here would just be at this level, and then above it would.
Oh, yes,
this-
correct.
The whole site.
Yeah, and then when you go above, then it's that full floor plating.
Got it, okay.
Oh, I see.
Now, it's a really easy thing to think about. If you were to select that option, you could say, okay, let's just have surface parking at that first level, right? And then just build above. But I think it's important in scenarios like this, when you're putting parking under a building, that there's some occupiable space along the street. And then there you see the top floor again.
So in general, I like that concept for not just the hybrid option, but for all the options where we have a large mass. If I think it makes sense to get as much underground via the
Sure.
same kind of concept as we could. I would also just mention both options. Maybe merging it, merging both the library and the city hall functions into the 4 stories, and so we can condense the footprint and still allow some on grade parking if possible. If that
Oh, you
makes
mean
sense.
like in the new construction?
In the new
option?
construction?
Yeah, we have that one coming up.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Keep on jumping ahead.
No, that's fine. And we were just recording what we heard last night from
Right.
everybody with these exercises.
In the city hall option, so this gets them the square footage that they need.
Both options do. The only reason we showed this option, removing part of the building and building a new 2 stories, is you maintain more of the green space and that outdoor patio. But certainly in this other option, where you're just adding on adjacent to the building, that would get them the required square footage, but it would require, at that point, to really remove all the walls in here and just
Right.
reconfigure everything.
Yeah, even that second one where you're removing just that half, unfortunately, it seems like that half is actually the better part of the building, the existing building.
That's a good point.
Right.
And again, all of that is tied to cost, right?
Right.
You look
Yep.
at the cost for renovation and construction, or renovation of this versus the cost of new construction, which gets you everything you need for 100 years. So, that's part of the conversation too, when we get that information together.
Is it safe to assume that renovation of this building is gonna cost a lot because it's already in such bad shape?
It would, and people will tell you, well, the structure is fine, why aren't you just reusing it? But as you mentioned, the effort, then we'd really need to take out all the plumbing, all the restrooms, the building's not accessible. So there's significant amount of work that would need to be done to the building inside, interior. Right?
All the mechanical, the lack of windows, the chopped up spaces, like there's a lot.
Right, all new exterior windows, right, roof. So that was our thought process with the renovation and additions. Were there other questions?
I guess it would just be a comment that without structured parking, this, we don't have a lot of street park or on surface grade parking just because we have the current 1-story buildings.
Right. Right. Okay, so let's go to, whoops. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's in a different PDF. Never mind. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so now this is the new construction option. And what you're looking at is the lower level, because in this option, the thought was, well, let's maintain the library building, right? But move the senior center into that building and repurpose it, right? Because it's very similar in square footage. So then that leaves you the north side of Hubbard Avenue to reimagine. So if you were to put a building there, and again, we'd have to work with setbacks and everything. You could put parking below grade, and this is just a real rough block. And typically when we are working on parking below grade parking structures, we figure like 350 square feet per parking space, right? That'll tell us how many spaces we can get in that area. But yours is a little challenging geometrically. So I figured about 425 to 450 square feet per parking stall, which you could possibly get up to about 100 parking spaces below grade. This is just really high level napkin sketch, okay? So then if you go to the grade level on Hubbard Avenue, Molly was working with some setbacks and trying to work in some parking or green space on the east side of the City Hall block. That's the blue block. And then that more orange block is the library. So it could be green space parking, and then Raleigh House is right directly, to the east of that. Then there's, moving to the middle, you see that hatched box. That would represent, okay, that's a connection between these two uses. And, maybe it gets a little bit bigger if there's more shared functions in that space. Again, this is really high level. But, and I think this really hints at what we talked about with the blocking last night. If you have a bigger building there, how can you perforate it or pass through it between Elmwood and Hubbard Avenue? So that's what you're seeing there. And then there's that first floor of the library with parking directly to the north of that. And we certainly have to work with the library about book drop. You'll see a little note, bookmobile. The city just purchased a new bookmobile, and you know, something we learned later is they would really love to have it here on site with the library, just a lot easier for them coordination. Again, just a placeholder. And then there, you could exit that parking on the top. And I don't know, I can't really read my notes. It says, oh, the parking, about 30 parking.
Parking spaces.
About 30
18
parking spaces. And then, you know, from that spot over to that wall of those existing commercial buildings, there could be like another green space that connects through. So everything isn't so dense.
Having pass-throughs for people, yeah, and exterior designs too. I mean, they're coordinated to create that campus environment identity too. You know, it's all gonna be coordinated, hopefully, to really show some identity to the area.
Right. And then this one is just another floor of the city hall, you know, roughly about a little under 12,000 square feet. And typically, you know, when you're doing multi-story buildings, you know, we'd like to be more than that because that's kind of small, but it works here because you're commingled with another larger building. So all that vertical circulation, you know, it can be shared between the two. So it works pretty well. And then the library block, again, it's just a placeholder. It extends over that parking to the north. So that first floor is a little bit taller, probably about 16 feet. And then as you move up the third floor, the same footprint. And then when you get to the roof, this is 4-story library and 3-story, it's kind of showing 2 together. But then what happens is the building's set back. So there's a green space on the roof, kind of pulling them away from the neighbors, kind of reduce the scale of those buildings.
Could I suggest at least on the library portion? So this looks like it's on the north side of the building.
The green space?
The green.
Yes.
Right, like getting that on the south side of the building might make a little more sense.
Because if you're gonna be
And then you can overlook the, I understand why you're doing it for the city hall portion. You're trying to step down to meet the neighbors.
Yeah.
I'm wondering maybe it's flipped, so the green space is on the east side,
That's a good point.
in that location, and then that really tightens up the building kind of at that point.
And maybe you have a little bit more green space on the south side, and then on the north side, it steps back a lesser amount, but there's still a
Right.
step back.
Yeah, that would work. And then
Yeah.
as far as it would be nice, maybe on the ground level, how you have it oriented makes sense, but maybe on the upper levels, maybe the building protrudes to really give us that face as it parallels the street, because right now they're kind of set back, but there's not really that downtown, I don't know, building, street building kind of space making that you're trying to, or in my mind, that we're kind of trying to create.
On Hubbard Avenue, you're saying
On
hold that face,
Hubbard.
hold that street edge a little bit
Hold that
more.
street edge, maybe not on the first floor, right?
Just
Maybe
doing
it's a overhang at the first floor that allows people to get, you know, out of the rain or something, a
Colonnade.
little colonnade or something, but then at the upper floors, we have that kind of continuity to bring that to the. And then is the idea to kind of give some green space in between the library and what would be on the other, I forgot what's on the other side of the senior center right now.
Yes.
So that could be a pedestrian kind of thoroughfare through the block.
Right. But it would still, you know, if you do that, I don't think that would really hinder the quality of that urban experience. You know, with the buildings, it's just like a little perforation through the building.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. I think little alleyways are kind of cool. You can
they're cool.
add some murals and really make it a kind of, those are the funnest things when you're walking through a new city, like the things you stumble upon, right?
Yep.
Are there any solar panel access considerations for the rooftop?
There would, you know, there's a couple ways to handle that. In this option, the thought was the solar panels could all go on the roof, but there's also applications, the new computer science building at the UW campus. They're using solar panels as a pergola. So it's the outside screening for sun. And then they have also some roof mounted. So there's a lot of different options you can approach with solar.
Yeah.
I'm
and
kind of
thinking-
confused now, of all these options, if the new construction option, or whatever, what's the total square footage for the library? 82,000 square feet?
Correct. And then
for
the city hall
it's
is about,
28,000?
yes, that's
What
correct.
would it be for the senior center?
The senior center is about 32,000 square feet
Okay.
right now.
And so in this option, the senior center isn't shown because the idea is that the existing library space would become the senior center space.
So the square footage, Molly made a good point. The square footage for these two options that you're looking at is all the same. So everything adds up. So I think that, if,
So that's what you're doing.
correct. Right.
And then that's at one story underground parking, and presumably you could do a second story depending on the water table and
Mhm.
the counts that we need to hit. and-
Yes, and balance it with budget.
Right,
There is a
budget,
premium to
everything
go
else.
one level below grade, but then it goes up exponentially as you're going deeper,
Makes
right? You're
sense.
excavating more dirt. You have to
Sure.
remove that material, your footings and foundations get deeper. And as you mentioned, if we have to do some dewatering, that plays into the equation as well.
Mhm.
But it's pretty routine that we place parking below buildings.
Mhm. Another option, would it be crazy to just only do the library, like reconstruct a little bit, how we were showing us, have the parking underneath?
Oh, just park under the
adding onto
library?
Library, and then since it's the bigger square footage that we need. Senior center, reconstruction instead. So, I don't know if there's
So
So
you're saying
just not doing this part of the parking, just doing this,
Oh.
correct?
Mm.
Just the
Yeah,
stuff
just
on the left.
Library, so the library is not the senior center. You add on to it, make that the library, just make it bigger, parking.
Yeah, I think that was the other option that you were showing, right? The option where we're keeping the existing buildings.
Not all of them, I was thinking just the
Oh,
library.
just the
You
library
know, other
part.
two. I don't know. So there's cost.
Right, there's all these mix and mash.
Mhm,
Yeah.
That would make more sense.
I don't. So I think this would still form under the hybrid approach, but instead of moving the senior center to the library stays the library and just gets added on to.
Then that really goes back to one of these options then, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a hybrid between this and.
Right, but you're saying, let's go back to so you're saying,
Yeah, the library in this case is what I think she's getting at, but then the other two are new buildings.
oh, I see.
So
the
senior
library
center is
that- is that what you're
brand
trying
build
to
a new
get?
senior center and city hall on the north side.
That
Yeah.
library looked so cool, adding on to it, I thought it looked nice. Mm-hmm.
I guess my only concern about this scenario, and these are interesting ideas that we really didn't talk about last night, is whether any of the units get what they need with this sort of renovation option.
Oh, like if you're adding on to the senior center and that stays a senior center, right? And you add on to city hall and that stays a city hall.
Right.
That's a really good question.
And the
And I
same
think,
token for the library.
right, I think you all know the senior center very well. There's certain challenges with change in levels, wayfinding and other challenges with that building. it does give them everything from an area standpoint, the
Right.
square footage, but then you layer on top of that, well, how does that space function as a senior center, right? Flexibility, eyes-on spaces, ease for people to move through the building. Those all become part of the
Security.
conversation.
Yeah, and just given the conversation that we had in the focus group for the library, there were lots of ideas floated for space needs and programming needs. And my concern would be that the entire space, would that meet the needs of all of the things that we talked about in those meetings?
Mhm.
Yeah. And it's a cost consideration, yes, but
Mhm.
and we don't have those numbers, in front of us, and that's not our purview
Right,
here,
right.
but
Right, and then the question is, people always ask us, how are these buildings going to function for the next 100 years?
right.
And that's part of the conversation too. And I think what's really important when you build new construction or renovation is that you have flexibility built in, that you can adapt and change over time. And then that's part of the discussion too, if you add on to these existing buildings, still, how adaptable are they in the future? And that's part of the conversation too, once we get everything in front of you.
I really love Jean, right? I really love what you're saying, like, here we are giving this number, but is it really gonna work if we just renovate? And I think we all got the feeling when we took tours of these buildings, everything's so cobbled already. And are we just adding to that more cobbled feel? So it's not gonna be a surprise. I love the idea of the senior center going to the library and that we get the new library in City Hall. City Hall and the library would get everything they want in a new building. Would the senior center, I guess I am looking at Tammy, would the senior center be able to envision getting everything you want, moving to an existing building and renovating it?
I don't fully know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I do question that as well. I think it depends on how much more square footage are you getting?
I think it would depend on how much more square footage that we're getting. And obviously, we're going to have to take the inside of that building and blow it out and make it work for us. Especially when you're talking about, we need a commercial kitchen in there for the dining site. We need large gathering spaces. I'm just not sure how that would work. I love the idea of it, but in terms of the square footage and the layout, I just don't know at this point.
So should one of the options be everything we've done here in the footprint of the library be a completely new senior center?
Well, I think the ins and outs of like where this room goes and where that room goes, I think that'll be in a future phase, right? That's not really part of this purview.
But should one option be everything is a new building? And the senior center's in the footprint of where the library stands now, and it should be a total, if we're,
Yeah, that I think is the current,
do we have that?
the current hybrid option.
Right.
So
that's
in
what
this case, they're saying this is the new
Senior
the
center,
new senior center.
completely knock down the library, make it new.
Oh, no,
This is
using
what
the
I'm
foot.
saying.
Oh, okay.
This is what I'm
I
saying.
see, okay.
Should one of the options be completely new buildings for all three?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Sure. Just a brand new senior center.
In case, I mean,
I have a question.
In the library.
We talked about, the library and these other buildings not being structurally sound to add on. So if we are limiting the senior center by going to the existing library, we only have that footprint to work with. Is that correct?
I think so. And it sounds like the existing footprint of the library would be able, there's enough square footage there
For today.
to meet the projections with all the added blocks on them
Yeah.
for the,
But you could build
For the
on to the
future.
existing library,
I
go
see.
out from it.
Okay.
Right. The current library is a little bit larger than the space needs that we identified with Tammy. So there's probably like an extra like 4,000 square feet of growth space. If you were to keep the existing walls and, you know, like Tammy suggested,
And that includes the
Right, right.
new adult day center.
right,
square
that's
footage
everything
and
in there,
everything.
correct.
Yeah, where did this adult daycare center come up? It's,
We had that discussion in the focus groups
Okay.
that we had previously. It also was a suggestion of the former director of the senior center. At one point, I was just told that the senior center had wanted the Hubbard activity space as a possible consideration at one time for the adult day center. So an adult day center is a place where caregivers who are caring for someone at home can get a break and some respite, and then their person they're caring for would come to the senior center for activities, programs. They do have to have their own designated space in that type of a setup.
have the numbers you've generated for the square footage anticipated, what year did that go out to? I mean, how did you, I asked this yesterday and I'm still kind of confused as how did you generate these square footages for necessary need? Is that, how far in the future is that?
That's a really good question. I think we'll have to, you know, again, lean on, you know, Tammy and Abby behind me. But, you know, we met with them and understood what they have right now. And then for the space needs, and they would say, okay, I need 6 future offices or a couple of workstations for interns. So how far out that goes, did you have an idea? You know, is that, you know, like 20 years out, 30 years out, 50? It's that's a really good question. You know, I would anticipate that that would certainly go, you know, anywhere between 30 and 50 years out, you know, that future growth.
But the last numbers we got were Middleton had a population of so much and we've essentially doubled within, what, 2019 or something? I can't remember what those numbers were.
Mhm.
But, you know, if you go exponentially in the increase of population, then you almost have to go back and look exponentially at the demand on what these buildings are gonna be required to do in the future.
Mhm.
And again, that leads to the point that if there's construction, they have to be, if there's new construction, they have to be constructed in the sense where you can add on, add up, or add out.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it becomes a space issue, and then we need to really look at some alternative sites for some of these larger buildings.
I think that's a great consideration for all 3 buildings.
Yeah.
I want to ask a question about the senior center, though. If you're moving into the existing library and everything's on 2 floors, it sounds like that's more accessible and navigable for your clients, right? If you're only on 2 floors, you can build it out any way you want if you're going to gut it and kind of redo it. But that's what I've been hearing, but I haven't heard anyone say that.
Well, the senior center right now is like a warren. There's got little spots all over the place. And we do have an elevator and we do have stairs. Quite a large space is taken up for the Meals on Wheels, and we do have meals in the senior center. And, you know, this goes into the design where I really think that Tammy, you know, and some of the other ones that are familiar with it need to really put some input in of is it feasible to go into the library and reconstruct it the way it is? Or otherwise build a new building. But, you know, I guess it's, you know, how do you plan for stuff like this? You know, I guess
But even if it was a new building, 2 floors would probably be more ideal. There's enough room over there to do a 2-floor building, whether it's new or the existing library, right? And you could leave room to add on. Maybe you want a memory care unit later on too. My mom took great advantage of that.
It's a good point.
I mean, memory care for day clients, yeah.
I think what Kevin is asking is, are you comfortable with 2 stories versus more?
Well, if you got an elevator, 3 stories are fine. But then, you look at the issue of if there's safety issue in the building, a fire or something is getting the people out. And a lot of people, may not be able to use stairs. I know, in some of the state office buildings, when they had their fires drills, it was, people had to carry other people down the stairs.
And so you think with that thought, maybe 2 stories is best?
I would say yes, my own opinion. I don't know, it's how other people feel about it, but, you can't build them for the seniors. The big issue for seniors is mobility. And then if we have other, people in there with dementia issues and so on, you got to get them out of the building if there's an emergency. So maybe 2 floors would be optimum. Unless you had a 3rd floor for offices and everything else.
But 1 floor in the library is like the basement. So is that considered 2 floors then if it's like a basement?
Pardon?
Isn't the one, in the library, it's the basement too? It's like,
So it's the
The lower
senior
level.
center.
Yeah, the senior center has a basement and 1 floor above.
that's like a pretty big, isn't it, in the library?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much the entire footprint,
Yeah.
most of the footprint. So, sorry, getting back to you guys. So, you showed us the hybrid, renovation. Did you have, 2 more kind of a little more in-depth, massing plans for the 2 all brand new,
The new constructions are.
right?
Yeah, based on these right now. These
Yeah.
solutions.
Mhm.
So we'll take comments and then readjust these and then put them into something a little more.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense because we just talked about this last
Yeah.
night. So,
Mhm.
okay.
So the all new construction, I mean, it could be a scenario where what you looked at just previously, library and city hall combined, and then a new senior center on the library site. That would be one option of all new construction,
Gotcha.
in addition to, something that Nate is sharing on the screen right now.
I would maybe suggest similar to that. Like I like what's shaping up on the north side of the street in the hybrid option. But if we are to do brand new senior center, I think it would make sense for that to go closer to the diner than replacing the
Library.
library. That would bring it closer to the rest of downtown. And it would help a little more as far as staging or goes, as far as sequencing these buildings and still being able to operate other ones.
Right, like you're saying, you could build the senior center in the parking lot next to Hubbard Avenue.
Mhm.
Right,
The inconvenience for a while when there's no parking.
right.
And then when the time is right, then you'd remove the library, and that would allow you to build everything across the
And it
street.
would keep everything closer to downtown than to separate the, the senior center with parking from the rest of downtown. I'd rather have the parking kind of in between the senior center and St. Luke's, and then the senior center closer to the diner.
Okay.
I guess my other comment about like this one in particular, like I like the idea of still having access from both the east and the west to the larger structure by the railroad tracks and having the underground parking. I'm wondering if instead of, this is kind of going against what I just talked about, but instead of having the senior center where it's located now, but if the senior center where it says civic campus parking, at least then you'd get that proximity between the senior center and city hall and the library. And then it might give you a little more, you might be able to even keep the parking as is, where we have that through parking. So essentially the senior center would go where this building is now.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
saying right where the
Mhm.
box is
It's
here.
right next to Raleigh.
Right, and then it keeps kind of the buildings all together.
Visually, it's balanced, isn't it?
The only thing right now, most of the, we'd have to try to find to get some surface parking for library and city hall somehow,
Mhm.
which might be difficult, but the more we can compact those buildings, if we need to go to get a variance for 5 stories, I feel like that's like where it is, not right next to homes. I think that might be.
That's an interesting notion
amenable.
because you could put, at one level of parking below City Hall and the library on that south side,
Right,
right? And then
Right.
if the senior center slides over to the east, kind of between the Raleigh house and that surface parking.
right.
that-
Yeah, or just where it is right now and.
yeah.
Have some ties back to the Raleigh house, have some architectural nods to it, might be
Mhm.
nice. And then, I mean, I guess hypothetically, you could put underground parking under all of this as well, if the counts need be.
Mhm.
But as long as it's structured, so
Yeah.
build, if we need new buildings in the future, like it would support it, that we wouldn't have to like come back and
Right.
Right.
start from square one.
I agree. Put underground parking under all of them if we're building new buildings. Seniors don't have to use them, but we have more spaces.
Right, no matter what, we still need to provide on-street parking, or
Right.
sorry, grade parking.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
all 3 buildings. And I guess in this one, the pedestrian walkthrough is like an enclosed area, right? We're thinking like a
There's-
open atrium. It could be either one, right?
Atrium,
Right.
You know?
Mhm.
I'm just thinking
Yeah.
it might be nice, and you're already buying those 2 walls anyways. You might as well just put a roof over
It could
it.
be indoor space.
Right,
You know,
right,
tables, chairs.
I'm just thinking back to some of the areas that we,
To make it efficient, you would want to have it somehow connected because you just
your
want like one
stairs,
bank of
your-
elevators.
yep,
Right.
perfect.
That's where we pick up our efficiency.
So I guess that's my comments on this one.
Yeah.
Anybody else on this one? If they're starting to develop these a little more, we're just trying to give them enough feedback that
Mhm.
they can move forward.
Some underground.
And you had a good, I think it was you who put the block yesterday for kind of have an arcade along Hubbard where you have the overhang and a place to kind of
Yeah, I
go
like
through
that
and
too.
that, we talked
Yeah,
about that a
we
little
have
bit
some
too.
Wisconsin winters, as
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
knows. Cold. It's
Yeah, it's good.
and then can you jump back to the other brand new? I guess to me, this one, we don't get the benefits of having combined buildings. And from everything we've kind of talked about, it sounds like the senior center kind of wants to be separate, but the other 2 buildings seem to maybe want to be together just for efficiencies. And this kind of splits all 3 buildings, 3 separate buildings.
Right, that's what
The parking, I think there's just going to be some hardships. Like I think we still need to find the underground parking underneath the south block. And splitting the buildings apart this much, it's going to be difficult to do that.
Mhm.
Like personally, I feel like the other one seems a little, the other one, as well as the hybrid option that we talked about, or the alternate hybrid option where we talked about where the senior center goes on the south side. it just seems to connect them a little bit. Like, like the pockets of green space are nice, but I think as far as the downtown, to try to keep that building rhythm going, it might be nice. I don't know, other thoughts from people?
I really love this option, I think.
So I
As
guess,
far as connecting, like we talked about meeting space for City Hall within the library. I like it for sustainability reasons, for the footprint being together.
question about this, would it make sense to flip them? So
Sure.
the city hall goes where the existing senior center is and the library shifts down. Then if you had a atrium or through connection, right, in between the two entrance point, right, that goes all the way through, and you can continue that to the other street instead of dying into the residence. Might be another, like, just flip the yellow and the blue in this instance. And then I think you kind of have this like elongated library, and maybe
Yeah.
maybe the library kind of, or sorry, the city hall kind of flips a little bit, and maybe it has a an entrance from both street. The only issue with that is then you lose kind of the nice area that we have for parking, but maybe it's not the building, but have some connection, to both streets, because this isn't like the south side where you can kind of, for lack of a better term, turn your back to the railroad, but we don't want to turn our back. Sorry, I should know the name of the street, but the street to the north of Hubbard, the one just down here.
Elmwood.
Elmwood, thank you. Like, because that is still part of downtown, and I don't think we want to just turn our back to that either.
I like that idea. And the feel of going from the residential area first to the library on that side feels nice. And then it doesn't make any sense logically, but it's just
Right. And I think it might,
less official.
yeah,
It's a little
User friendly.
easier. It's like wading in instead
Right.
of diving right to, oh, here's official city building. I don't know, that doesn't make any sense. but
no, it
that's the
does.
feel I
And
have.
kind of to add on to that, I think there would be an opportunity to create some nice outdoor space
I
that
totally
connects
agree.
the Rally House
Connects
and the
Raleigh House,
library.
Library.
Because people are more apt, I feel, to use space next to a library than they are to City Hall.
Yes.
I mean, like the courtyard down here, I don't know how often it's really used, even though it's kind of a civic space, public space. But there could be some nice
Yeah,
synergy between the two.
yeah. I like that. It was a good thought for you.
It sounds like from the group's discussion that I guess priority would be on street at grade parking primarily, right? And then if you can't get it all there, then it might go underground. And then the third desire would be above ground in a structure. Is that kind of, am I thinking of that right?
I would strongly encourage to try to get away from any of like
Structure.
structure
Yeah.
above ground, just
I
because
think we all agree.
like
with that.
Abby said, it just
It
limits
sounds like
that
there's
use.
agreement on the parking though. That's,
I think so. I think
Agreed. Like, I think it's a combination, right? Max out the one floor underground parking as best you can, and then provide as much, densify the buildings as much as we can to provide that on grade parking, but we need a minimum for all of the buildings. Most importantly, probably the senior center, followed by the library, and Abby, correct me if I'm wrong, but probably the city hall could do with just a few spaces. I mean, right now, there's no dedicated lot per se per city hall,
Right.
street parking, city parking lots.
Yeah, and one thing we could also think about is if we're finding it undesirable for the public to park underground, we could put the fleet vehicles underground, which would help a little bit with operations as far as like not having to clear snow. We could, right now we're trying to convert some of our fleet to electric vehicles, so that could provide an opportunity for charging infrastructure in the underground space.
Yeah, I think that's a a great thing. And that's what we saw kind of in one of our
Okay.
tours, Oak Creek. It was actually primarily their underground parking was only for city vehicles, but that they had them. I can't really compare it because they were in a more rural suburban setting than we are here. It's not nearly as dense, but I don't think we could give it all to City Hall, city-owned vehicles, but I think that definitely makes sense to give more to the public and
I
large.
like that.
Their library and City Hall was co-located there as well. And they took some advantages, I think, in sharing some of those facilities
Mhm.
at Oak Creek.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think like certainly there's some conferencing that can be shared, but I think the primary thing just cost wise is all the systems and the egress. That's where we're gonna see like the cost savings.
We don't think it's an issue being so close to the library, like in case there is a need for more space in the future. Where we'll be able to build on top or
On top
of
of,
the city hall, like if they need a bigger space, you know, if they're so close together.
so the one thing that like if we flip this, right,
Right.
City Hall could potentially grow to the north.
Mhm.
Going down on your screen.
Mhm.
Sorry, it's always tough to look at
Yep.
something where
I know what you mean.
north is down and south is
If
up.
it's flipped, you have that lower
Right.
leg that you can expand into,
Right.
should the need arise.
I think the idea, usually a lot of times how these work, right? Like a standard parking bay, 15 feet, 30 feet, drive out 15 feet. So that 90-foot bay kind of sets up your structure and correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but then that kind of carries up and will help inform
Right.
the structure above. And usually it's wider bays, wider spans that are more adept to renovations in the future than what's currently
Right.
these buildings. So at the end of this meeting, Paul, we have time check. We have about 15 minutes left. What do you guys need from us?
So I just want to summarize what we heard. So, okay, we have three differentiated options. The first one we showed you was the renovation and addition. So I think, the one where we move this half of the building didn't really seem like it had a whole lot of, I don't want to say support, but that wasn't the favorite. I think the other was to just add on horizontally for that. Is that a correct assumption on my part?
Think so.
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
And then, but with that, it's the issue with the library. Are you interested in pursuing, as you had mentioned, if there's a new building, even though that's in addition to the library, you can consider it new, do we try and park under it? I think that was,
I think any new buildings that make sense to try to park under, we
Okay.
should try to do it.
perfect. So I think we have a handle on that first remodeling and addition option. Then the second, we had the hybrid. And I think there's different strategies there. Certainly what we showed where the senior center moves to the library and then the city hall and library are on the
Flipping those.
north side.
But I think the thought was to have City Hall,
Mhm.
correct me if I'm wrong, is to move over
Mhm.
closer to the commercial.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Just flip the
And
yellow
move library
blocks. and the-
Closer to the
Mhm.
Yeah.
residents.
And this next go around, when we do this, I'll try and get some little massing models done so you can see the relative heights, because when we flip it, now we're putting more program on the side where there's residential. So I
Right.
just want to, work that
Yep.
out so you all see that too.
I just wanted to quickly point out for phasing, flipping it would make it a lot easier because then you potentially are only moving city hall functions twice. And of the three options, I think city hall would be the easiest to locate somewhere and then locate back another place, whereas the public library is probably the most challenging. And so if you're kicking the senior center out, they can't move into that new space until it's renovated. So you have to get the books out and you don't have a new library to move into. So just from a phasing standpoint, I like the idea of flipping those two.
Right. So cities City Hall goes away, the new library is built in its place in the parking. After they're moved in, the senior center moves into the library, and then once they're in, demo the existing senior center and the new city hall goes. That makes a lot of sense, Abby.
Your instinct is good right now.
That was lucky.
Good mistake though.
Okay.
In this
So
option.
that's really looking at that hybrid. So we have some revisions to make there, looking at flipping it. And then the new construction, it's really looking at the block diagrams that Nate was showing before and just illustrating that in that 2D plan drawings that we had showed before. And it seems like we probably have 2 or 3 permutations there with the
Yeah.
all new construction.
Yeah, like this one, like moving the senior center over
Right.
closer and densifying, moving them in. I don't know what the solution is for the other option. I'm not, the one where there's the 3.
Oh, all on the.
Sorry, it's 3 separate buildings.
This one, right
This one, yeah. Like in my mind, maybe this option is where the senior center stays where it is and the library comes back down. Like it's kind of the hybrid option between the hybrid option and the other options. Like this, I don't know. This is just one,
Yeah.
Is my least favorite by far. I don't know how
So if
everybody
it's
else
this
feels.
one and we move the senior center over where it says civic campus
Right.
parking, does that appeal to more people?
Maybe.
This way it keeps, my thought is it keeps the campus together and it keeps the parking a little more usable. But I'm
Yeah.
interested to hear from everybody else.
I agree with you. It creates a connectedness among the
Mhm.
buildings that this one doesn't quite have yet. I have another question related to flipping the library and that other scenario. Did you say you're going to show us something that's to scale so that we could see
Which one is that?
what the building heights?
Mhm.
would
Yes, I
look
could do
like?
some diagrams. The next go around, we'll have a little bit more time. We can generate some of that information for you too. Right, so you can see a streetscape. There will be no architecture on it at all, just blocks.
I like that idea. I'm just interested to see what that looks like with a taller building against that residential
Sure.
area.
And maybe look at with that one, if we're stepping the front of that building kind of to parallel the street, maybe we can step back so that it's your view cone, right, only reads like the first couple stories, is not as abrupt as having a
Mhm.
4-story wall.
On the Elmwood side?
Again, against all these residents,
Yeah,
right? So
I
you
totally
can,
agree.
if it's a
Yeah.
2-story building that steps back a little
Mhm.
bit towards the street, it's not as intrusive
So we're
as.
thinking, like you said, we're not turning our back. We're thinking about the presentation from both sides.
Yeah, and just respecting the
Yeah,
the
totally.
neighbors.
I like that.
This particular option doesn't leave much space for adding on now in the future.
Right. The one thing that this would do is it would give us all the space in between the two parking lots we have and the senior center, right? That would become parking. That would be a large continuous surface that at some point, if the city needed additional buildings, to your point, it wouldn't really allow expansion of the existing 3 buildings per se. I mean, you could still build out the senior center into that, right? That could still come west or right on your screen, but the other 2 are kind of landlocked.
And City Hall, in my mind, is the one that probably will have to expand the soonest. if the city keeps growing at the pace it is now, but could be true of the senior center as well.
The largest growing population in the country is going to be the seniors.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as the different generations retire. And right now we're experiencing quite a demand on our senior center with a number of people coming in. It just seems to be increasing. That's when I brought my question up of, how you project out. I mean, I'd hate to see you build a building and then 10 years later it's out of date.
Right. The one thing,
Can't, don't have enough space, so it's hard decisions to make here.
yeah. In this option, so the senior center could, expand to the west. Since the city hall and the library are connected, I mean, there would be, and all that land is still city owned and it's not split up. It's a big parcel. If in the future the city determined that they need to build a new building, that would allow potentially the city hall to move across the street again, and then the current city hall to be incorporated into the library, like if that's the way that the trends went. But yeah, you can only predict the future so far, right, in advance. So in this instance, if the senior center is where it's currently shown or where it says civic campus parking, I think that is certainly a downfall with the south side, right? Like the south side's kind of landlocked with those two programs there. So that's just one, I think that's a downside on this concept.
And should another option be the hybrid, but recreate the senior center at the library, like knock it down and that could be its new senior center?
That would be, I mean, that's kind of my thought. If you go back, I don't really care for the other, I don't know if anybody else
I
does
agree.
the other option, the other brand new option, but I think a really good point is if you keep the senior center where it's shown on the screen right next to Hubbard Avenue, that's a new build. And then the north side becomes what was shown in the hybrid option with the city hall and the library. I feel like that would be a better second option as far as
And then our extra
pursuing.
land is there instead
And then
of here.
and then the extra land is where the current library would be.
Yeah, that's cool.
We haven't looked at this yet, though. Library.
So it's exactly what you're saying, where the library or the senior center is a new build where
At the library.
at the library, except for we're switching instead of at the library proper, it goes to the other end of the parking lot, so it's closer to downtown. And then the parking shifts where the library is. So it's what it's what you're saying, except for the parking lot in the library or in the new senior center just switch locations to push the parking to keep the senior center closer to downtown. It'll also help with phasing of everything.
Actually, I just worried that the space makes sense for senior center.
Yeah, I think, well, so any renovation, all of those would be addressed, like the basement would be. I mean, currently you're in the basement, but it's very chopped up. Like the idea would be, right, like the library has larger spans, can support a little. It's not old crumbling stone foundations. It's got, proper modern infrastructure as far as structure goes. So.
In listening to the permutations, Abby made a good point about phasing. We don't want to get hung up on the phasing, but I think some thought about that would help to inform which options are the most viable. For example, the one that you see on the screen, you're just thinking about phasing, what if the library went in the open parking lot? Okay, I had it before and now I lost it.
You have it. You have it.
Yeah, the library went into the parking lot.
Uh-huh.
And then you demolish the library and then you build City Hall over there. Then you can demolish City Hall and then you'd put senior center where the civic campus parking went.
So in this option, the library and the city hall would just switch.
Correct.
I think,
You know, thinking about the phasing, I know, you know, there are certain reasons why you liked this one. And you could certainly do it, but then it requires someone to relocate
right, I don't,
temporarily.
does anybody see any? So the library would be closer to Hubbard Avenue
Right.
Diner and City Hall would be closer to St. Luke's,
Mhm. If we start layering on that thought about phasing.
right? I don't,
So they're saying they move the senior center to here.
Yes.
I mean, that seems reasonable to me. I don't know.
Or, you know, somewhere in the middle.
Jocelyn, what do you think? Sorry.
I've been involved in a lot of construction projects in libraries, and this is definitely the most complex because of the phasing and the limited space that we have, and the fact that we need to include parking. Just a couple of general thoughts, and then specifically to this. I think when we think about moving the senior center into the library, we need to make sure that whatever the senior center is experiencing as challenges right now will either be solved or will be improved enough, dramatically enough, that it's worth the cost of that. And I think that that option will be honed in more as we look at what would it cost to renovate the library versus just look at new construction. The other thought is specifically related to where the library goes. It's important to keep in mind that while the library may be more friendlier to have next to the residential area, we also have about 12 to 1,800 people through the door every day. And so then we really need to be thinking and thoughtful about where we're putting the entrances and exits to that building if we're going to put that next to residents. So does that answer your question enough a little bit?
That does, just in, that answers a lot, but in particular to the thing that's on the screen, what we're proposing or what Paul proposed in order to make phasing work a little better is actually moving the library in this option closer to Hubbard Avenue Diner and moving the City Hall closer to St. Luke's in order to move buildings around and only have people moving once other than City Hall.
Yeah,
There's not.
I think
you
for
don't
the
have a preference.
purposes of where we're at right now with the blocking and stacking exercises, it's not necessarily, it's neither here nor there really.
Okay.
At this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that makes sense, Paul. Just maybe make that change as well on this one. So we're running up on time. Is there anything else you guys need from us?
Our team is going to get to work and put these, you know, into a little more, you know, detailed formats. But if there's anything that comes up from, you know, in the next couple days, let us know. That might be tough right now. Setting our next meeting.
Abby, do you want to just send around a like doodle poll, kind of like we have in the past as far as meetings go at some point?
Or we could go back to our normal meeting date and time, which would be, let's see, be March.
Are we skipping February?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I clicked on February, but I said March. Let's see, what would that be? That would be February 27th at noon.
Yeah, why not?
What day of the week is that, Thursday?
That is a Thursday. Yep. Looking ahead though to March, that might be one that we would want to reschedule because the March meeting would normally fall on Thursday, March 27th, which is during spring break for, I think, all of the area school districts. So we might have people that are unable to make that one.
Yeah.
So that might be one we would just want to move up a week to March 20th, if that would work for everyone. So the next two meeting dates would be Thursday, February 27th at noon, and then Thursday, March 20th at noon.
Sounds good.
Is that okay?
Thanks, yeah. Anything else from any of the committee members? Otherwise, I will adjourn the meeting. Thanks all. Thanks consultants.
Thanks.
Leading this effort.